What do young people think are the reasons why their peers are committing suicide?
The biggest causes of teenagers and the youth committing suicide today is because it's either they're not getting enough help, they are not seeking out help, and usually there's this attitude of like, if I'm feeling depressed about something, I do not want to ruin my reputation of being this tough person and not wanting to go and look all soft by asking for help and seeking for help. And all of these emotions build up and it can mess up with them mentally. And I think maybe also another thing is maybe they do not know where to get help, because not everyone who is depressed actually has like a family member or a friend to look up to or to talk to.
What caused people to commit suicide is their family background. For example, other people will find that they don't have enough mentoring where they come from. So at the end of the day, they believe that ending your life is the only solution, of which is not the solution. Then number two, what instigates to this problem, it is because mental health is not emphasized within our society.
We as boys, it's like we're not equal as everyone, because whenever a boy like complain or cry, like to us, we just adapted to that norm that like men don't cry. So whenever like we start having issues, problems, we keep them to ourselves, and it ended up being like a burden on us, which like some ended up like finishing their lives thinking that everything will be fine.
I think it's mostly caused by the depression, but I think the main factor that is causing this high rate of suicide is because they don't have anybody to talk to. There's no really like foundations or companies or NGOs that really give us that support structure that we can have the platform to talk about things that really bother us. As peers or as youth, we have a lot of things that we are actually going through. It's called adulthood. We are going through the phase of adulthood, which nobody really prepared us for. So hence we are going through that depression phase or rate because of, I think it's just adulthood. So we are not readily or mentally prepared for such things. Hence we are not able to handle or control our pressure. So we opt for suicide because, okay, nobody can listen to me, so let me rather be quiet forever.
Why do people talk about committing suicide? Sometimes problems can feel overwhelming. Some people think about suicide but do not plan or act on it. For others, however, the thought of suicide might begin to seem like a real alternative to a problem or situation that appears hopeless. When people feel this bad, it's difficult to think about other choices or other ways to solve problems. On Vital Signs, we focus on suicide. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Zama Butelezi. Signing with us today is Ntabiseng Ndlovu. Coming up on the program, we hear from a Soweto mother whose young daughter committed suicide. We also speak to a clinical psychologist about suicide. We then speak to an occupational therapist about the role of occupational therapy in suicide. Remember that if you have attempted to commit suicide or have suicidal thoughts, please contact SADC's Suicidal Emergency Contact. It's a free number on 0800 567 567 or the 24-hour helpline, also a toll-free number 0800 456 789. Remember, you can be part of the show by asking our guest some of the questions on your mind, or you could simply share your views on what we're discussing, which is suicide. The number to call is 011 714 5861 or 5877. You can also share your thoughts with us on social media or via Twitter using it SABC Vital Signs or on our Facebook page, SABC Vital Signs. Vital Signs continues right after the break. Please stay with us. Suicide is devastating and has profound impact on loved ones, family and friends that are left behind. Each individual is unique. There is no single reason as to why someone thinks about commits suicide rather. However, there are several factors that may contribute to someone having suicidal thoughts. Let's listen to Pinky Twala, a mother from Diepkloof, Soweto, whose young daughter committed suicide, leaving behind unanswered questions, guilt feelings, and a 2-year-old child. Pinky Twala from Diepkloof, Soweto had just left her daughter and only child, 25-year-old Jabulile, with her mom when she received a call that would change her life.
After about 10-15 minutes, ngeni call umama athi nangu umntana kuyayihenga la yabo emkhukhwini. Hawu uyayihenga athi ya ngithi mshayi elami lisho njalo. Ngathi mshaye ustot uyihengelani wayangakhulumi nathi yabo. Okay sharp how ngithi hayi ngitshele uhusband wami yabo ngithi kuye hayi nangu uJabu bathi uyayihenga ekhaya yabo. Yazi uJabu ustot maka nenkinga wayangakhulumi kusho mina. Hayi ngithi ngiyachubeka ngibeke ianyanisa hayi ingene futhi call mama. Hayi sekukuphi Pinkis yabo. Ukhipha amagwebu manje yabona sesiyamthatha simise esibhedlela. Ngithi mina okay yes ngilahlela ibhodolo leke ngise ngiyawoka. Hawu mangokha ngifika la ngithola ukuthi sebahambile na esibhedlela.
Twala followed them to the hospital and had to endure a long wait before receiving an update from the doctor about her daughter's condition.
Hawu lapha yamasahleli kungene udoctor wama nenesi yabo. Dr. Makahamba nenesi athi how are you related to Jabulile yabona. Okay bamtshele ukuthi umama wakhe ugogo wakhe uanti wakhe ama friends lawa yithi yabo. Athi okay so lo sisi lo athi uvala umnyango ngithi ungawuvali lo mnyango wawuvala umnyango yabona kusho ukuthi sekunento engitshelayo ukuthi yabona athi uyawuvala ngithi ungawuvali lo mnyango yabo. Kusho mina hayi angawuvali ngempela yabona udoctor yo athi unfortunate like ngasukuma lapho yabona like yimi ngezwe isilungu like angiunderstand or angizwe isilungu angisazi isilungu na phela masekathi unfortunate already kusho ukuthi vele yaba ngithi hey or angiunderstand isilungu uthini bonyowe lo doctor kahle kahle yaba at unfortunately it was too late ukuthi usevele sekashonile yo ngitry ukuphuma ngomnyango my friend angivimbi ubonyiwe angiphosela khona lapha esofeni umama mama awezithi lapho phansi yaba.
Most family members would say that they never saw the suicide coming. Was it the same with Jabulile's family?
No. Angifuna mama bekahlala Jabulile kumntana oJabulile only that day nakhona angithi sijwayele ukuthi uyalala maka off uyabo ungumuntu olalayo vele siyamazi akafuna ukudisturb nolele angamnika something ukuthi ayihambe odlala lento ayithandayo ukuthi angamdisturb ngobulele mhlambe uthola ukuthi kwesinye isikhathi ungene ebusuku or ungene emini yabo.
Looking back, does the family believe that there were warning signs that they overlooked about Jabulile's state of mind?
Hayi lapho khona ngifuna uqamba manga. Ngizobe ngiqamba manga bengingawaboni. Bengingawaboni. Akaze nje ngibonise ukuthi ini ngoba noma nenkinga bekanga ngibonisa ukuthi ne problem ne boyfriend yakhe. Should be share na ama friends.
Twala talks to us about the impact Jabulile's suicide had on her as the mother, her child, and the family.
Hey, kube nzima yazi zama mara masengikhuluma iqiniso because uma walusi side after waba ne-high blood, bekangana-high blood, waba ne-high blood, waluza isight lamehlo, uyabona. After lapho, okay, nami bengekho sharp lokhu ukuthi bese ngibona ukuthi umhlaba ungiphelele. She was my only daughter. Wayikhamba yena, uyabona. So bengekho right lokhu ukuthi ngeke ngacabanga ukuthi wayengamlandeli, uyabona. But umuntu wangenza ukuthi ngibe strong lethu kuhle. Thi mangibheka ulethu kuhle ngathi ngizoshiya lo mntwana nomawe, umawe uzoba yini, uyabona.
Has the family ever sought counseling after Jabulile's passing, and are they even open to counseling services?
Azange siyithole counseling, azange siye ku-counseling. Ngiyafisa because ngiyayifuna i-closure ngomntanami, ngiyayifuna kakhulu, kakhulu.
A very sad story indeed. Remember that if you have attempted to commit suicide or have suicidal thoughts, please contact SADC Suicidal Emergency Contacts on 0800 567 567 or their 24-hour helpline on 0800 456 789. After the break, we speak to Sikanda Kala, a clinical psychologist, about suicide. Please stay with us. You may have heard that people who talk about suicide might not go through with it. However, people who commit suicide often give some warning of their intentions to take their life. Most people who attempt suicide say or do something to express their intention before they act. This means all suicide threats should be taken seriously. Joining us via Zoom to unpack depression, warning signs, how to tackle the conversation of suicide and self-harm, as well as parasuicide, how to get help, and what to do if you're worried about a loved one who may be suicidal. Let's welcome clinical psychologist Sikanda Kala. Sikanda, good morning and welcome to Vital Signs.
Good morning, Zama, and good morning to the viewers, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming through. Sikanda, talk to us about the prevalence of suicide in South Africa and how we compare to other countries. I'll tell you why I'm asking. In one street where I did the interview this week, there were 3 young people who have committed suicide and one had attempted twice to commit suicide.
Yeah, it's a very pertinent question given the South African landscape, because I think we have quite a lot of issues that manifest within the South African context that can result in higher suicide rates than average. And I think rightfully, like the show pointed out earlier, that there's sometimes more situational factors that play a role in the sense of something that has happened in one's life, whether that's financial fallout or job insecurity or domestic violence or anything of that sort, or relational difficulties that situationally creates a moment in which someone feels the inclination to take their life. But there are other times also in which we have mental disorders like depression, certain personality disorders, as well as substance use disorders, which is a very common difficulty in South Africa. So we do have quite high suicide rates, and it's always difficult to get the most accurate statistics because the research is so difficult because you need accurate reporting. However, one of the most recent and accurate statistics that I've heard is from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, SADC, which reports that there's more than 23 suicides per day in South Africa. And those are successful suicides in the sense that individuals then do end up taking their lives. And for each of those 23 suicides, there's more than 20 attempts for each of them. And that shows you how how pervasive and how quite high the suicide rates are. An interesting statistic as well is men are 4 times more likely to have a successful suicide. And there's a multitude of reasons for that, and we can get into that later in the show as well.
Sikanda, most people will say we never saw this coming. So tell me, who is at risk of suicide? For the benefit of those who are watching, what should people look out for?
Yeah. So I would say one of the most common mental disorders that we see presenting alongside with suicide or suicide attempts is depression. And I know we've spoken about depression in society quite a number of times, and that's because it's quite a significant issue in our society. And I would say one of the things to look out for is the signs and symptoms of depression, because that can start giving you an indication that, hey, someone is really struggling, and they may go to the extent of exploring suicide as an escape to the difficulties that they're experiencing. And some signs and symptoms of depression that we can be on the lookout for is what we refer to as a persistent low mood. Usually it persists for more than 2 weeks, because throughout the normal ups and downs of life, there are moments in which we're going to be sad and moments in which we're going to have a neutral or happy mood. But with depression, you see quite a persistent low mood. So you'll see the duration of it lasts much longer than something transient. You'd also see that the intensity or the severity of the low mood is quite intense. Usually it can even impair one's functioning. So you may see that they struggle to get out of bed and they're sleeping longer than usual. You may see that their appetite is decreased and they're really struggling to eat. Their energy can also decrease and they seem quite lethargic and fatigued. These are signs that maybe someone is struggling when you see that sort of impairment in their functionality. There's also a loss of interest or pleasure in activities that were once interesting or pleasurable. And more so, you also start seeing a social withdrawal, a social isolation. The person becomes quite withdrawn and keeps to themselves. And one of the big signs is you can also see a sense of hopelessness and worthlessness that begins to emerge. And at that point is when you start hearing sentiments of an individual wanting to perhaps give up, and they may make remarks of perhaps it's better to not be living, perhaps I should take my life, I don't see an escape out of this, it would be easier if it all ends. And I think sentiments like that need to be taken seriously. And it's moments like that in which we can just connect with someone and say, hey, what is going on, and how can we assist with whatever difficulties one may be experiencing. One other common, and this will be the last point on this, but I think one other common manifestation that we see is people turning to substances to try and escape. So the person may start drinking a bit more or exploring other drugs to just try and escape the sadness or the despondency that they are experiencing. And when we see that sort of escapism to substances, I think that can also be telling of a larger issue beneath the surface.
Sikanda, while you talk about those symptoms, there are those people that we will hear stories like, we really never saw this coming. This person was bubbly, he was very functional at work, and then boom, they commit suicide. In that case, what can families do? What should people do?
Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult question and a very difficult phenomenon to be experiencing, because at the end of the day, we're not mind readers, and we sometimes feel a sense of, how did I miss all of this? How did I miss that? How did I miss this sign? And I think it's so difficult because we know that a lot of individuals tend to suffer in silence as well. And I think also historically, we've seen a lot of public figures or people in the public limelight that really project this image of being fine and being okay and what have you, and then before we know it, we've lost one of them to suicide. And I think it becomes very difficult to determine, how can I see those warning signs there? For me, ultimately, what I'd say is one of the best approaches that we can take is to make sure that we have a healthy relationship and a vulnerable relationship with our loved ones, where they feel safe enough to give us some insight into their internal worlds. Because often when we're suffering in silence, we don't feel comfortable to express some of the internal turmoil that we're dealing with, or some of the challenges. I think we also live in a context where we carry so much responsibility, and we sometimes feel like we need to be strong for the family, or we need to be strong for those around us. And that results in a sense of suffering in silence. And I think it's important to just check in with our loved ones to say, hey, I know you're carrying quite a bit of responsibility. I know that things can be difficult, but how are you actually doing? I'm here. I'm here to listen. I'm here to take in what you have to say. And the more and more we can instill that sense of comfort in our loved ones, the more likely they are to express whatever sort of dynamics or intricacies that they may be feeling underneath the surface.
Sikanda, I know a few years ago I heard a story about someone, a young child who was at primary having committed suicide. And recently we had a 15-year-old who committed suicide. I think it was 2 weeks ago. It was 2 weeks ago. So while we're talking about that, when should parents and guardians and family members start checking in on young children?
I would say we're living in times now where so much is being thrown our way at an early age. We have interpersonal relationships with friends, with peers, and what have you at that age that exposing us to things that can be heavy and difficult to sit with if we don't have a framework to understand it. We're also living in the time where young individuals have cell phones in their pockets and are being exposed to social media and all of the pressures or the cyberbullying that comes with that as well. So at this point, I would say it's never too early to start having those conversations. Connect with your child. Even if we think about issues like gender-based violence and issues like that, it's never too young to connect with a boy child and to say, hey, these are some of the aspects of life, and this is how we manage emotions, and this is how we manage our frustration and our anger. I think we can instill all of these aspects at a very, very early age. And I think it's also the sooner we start, the better we connect and the better we understand one another. And the more that we connect and understand one another, the more comfortable that child is or that teenager is going to be in trying to express whatever difficulties they experience. So I think to just be mindful of times are different now, and young individuals are exposed to quite a lot, and it's important to give them a framework to understand the world that they live in, but to also reassure them that they can come and speak to us in ways that we won't judge them, we won't criticize them, we will take in what they have to say, and we will try and guide in the best way that we can. And where we struggle to guide, we will also point in the direction where they can get certain wisdom and insight and guidance into some of these issues.
Sikanda, as parents, we see things like parasuicide as not an attempt for a person to a cry for help. I saw on the package the lady saying when the grandmother phoned, she just said, just beat her up, she's being naughty. How has that impacted on more suicides being seen, where it's just seen as a cry, as not a cry for help, but as someone just being naughty or trying to get attention?
Yeah. It's a very, very difficult issue, because I think it speaks to the lived experience of the individual that is exhibiting behaviors of parasuicide, but then it also speaks to the lived experience of the family members or the friends or the community members that are exposed to some of the difficulties that come with parasuicides. And I think that is a very difficult issue to navigate through, because it's tough to sit and say, hey, take every single issue seriously, when the individuals that are the support systems feel the strain and feel the frustration of some of those moments. And I think what people are ultimately trying to say is they feel depleted, they feel exhausted, they feel ill-equipped, they feel frustrated with the situation. And I think just as much as they feel frustrated with the situation, the individual that's exhibiting those behaviors of parasuicide is also feeling frustrated with another situation as well, whatever sort of internal turmoil that they are experiencing, that they feel that they need to go to that extent. So I think one of the biggest disconnects is what is going on in the mind of the individual versus what is going on in the mind of those support systems. And I think if we can integrate a bit of empathy, and I really know it's easier said than done, but I think that is why any attempt to assist individuals needs to be a collaborative effort. It's very difficult for one individual to carry all of that responsibility on their shoulders. So that's why I think as society, we all need to come together and we need to say, hey, it's not just the mother or the grandmother. It also needs to be the uncle, the father, the grandfather that needs to step in and needs to say, hey, I'm here to assist. I'm here to lend a hand in trying to manage the situation. It needs to be community members that are also present and saying, hey, we're here to assist so you're not carrying the burden by yourself, where you're so frustrated that you think you need to beat someone into getting in line or falling in line, because those moments can be missed when someone's actually saying something larger, that I'm struggling more and more each day, more and more each week, and more each month, and I need some form of assistance. And I think if we can just turn to assistance and we can turn to support rather than turning to judgment, I think it can really start helping us connect with the situation a bit better.
Sikanda, let's just take a short break. We'll come back and continue with the discussion. Remember that if you have attempted to commit suicide or have suicidal thoughts, please contact SADC Suicidal Emergency Contacts on 0800 567 567 or their 24-hour helpline number 0800 567 789. Vital signs continue after the break. According to research, men are less likely to seek mental health services compared to their female counterparts. One of the factors that contribute to this underuse of seeking professional help is masculinity norms. It's often viewed that it is not okay for boys and men to express or discuss their emotions. We continue our discussion with clinical psychologist Sikanda Kala. Sikanda, so many years later, why are we still seeing men hiding their emotions and not seeking help, especially when it comes to mental health?
It's such an unfortunate phenomenon, and I think you rightfully touched on the masculinity aspect of it. I think I always draw reference to hegemonic masculinity, which is the predominant masculinity in society that says this is how you need to conform to these standards to be regarded as a real man, or to be exhibiting behaviors or characteristics of what we define as real manhood. And I think that creates a very slippery slope, because we then create the sense of the macho man archetype, and we create the sense of real men don't cry or real men don't show vulnerable emotions and what have you. And that doesn't obviously make sense whatsoever. As human beings, all of us experience negative emotions. All of us have moments of vulnerable emotions. And I think if we live in a society that makes it such that we judge or we criticize experiencing those emotions as men, we then create or perpetuate even a standard of suffering in silence. And I think that's the big issue that we continue to see. And I think you rightfully asked that, why are we still exhibiting this right now? And I think it just goes to show how entrenched in society it is, and how important it is to have that display or that show of what manhood is. And I think one of the big issues is we feel like if we don't conform to that standard of real manhood, so to speak, it then creates a sense of being excluded from the social landscape and being judged or ostracized for not being a real man. And I think as society, we need to still keep doing more to push back on those sentiments and to make sure we integrate a framework where individuals feel safe enough to express the normal emotions that all of us experience.
In your practice, are you seeing more men coming through, especially because of what has happened during COVID, where people lost jobs, there were divorces, people lost their belongings? Are you seeing them coming through, or it's still the same?
No, most certainly. I think there is definitely an uptake in the number of individuals that are experiencing mental health difficulties. But also, I think one positive attribute to that is people reaching out to take charge of their mental health. I'm seeing a greater willingness to do so, but that doesn't mean that we should drop our attention and our effort directed at getting people to take the initiative. You know, one interesting statistic that stands out to me is before the start of the pandemic, SADC, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, was receiving about 600 calls per day looking for psychological assistance. And since the pandemic has taken place, that has increased to more than 2,000 calls per day for people seeking assistance. So you can hear just how that number has jumped. And I think understandably so, people have experienced so many difficulties during the pandemic, from job insecurity to economic insecurity to being locked up with partners that exhibit issues of gender-based violence or domestic abuse, things like that, that have just spiraled out of control. And I think people are experiencing that with so much intensity that they feel they need to turn to someone to get some assistance.
Sikanda, when it comes to suicide, there is just, or mental health in general, there's just so much stigma attached to it. And I guess this has impacted on people seeking help. So many years later, why are we still stigmatizing mental illness?
Yeah, I think, you know, that is a question that I've always been throwing forward in an attempt for people to start thinking about this in more in-depth ways, to start questioning how are the conscious and subconscious ways in which we add to that problem, because we all have a role to play. I know that with depression, for example, we have really tried and made massive attempts to normalize the fact that individuals experience depression and it needs to be something that we give attention to. But there's so many other disorders, such as bipolar mood disorder, that many individuals still lack the understanding on what it actually entails. You know, they often think it's someone who's quite moody and their mood shifts many times throughout the day. Whereas if you look at what bipolar mood disorder actually is an individual experiencing either manic episode for 2 weeks or longer, in which their mood is elevated, or experiencing a depressive episode for 2 weeks or longer, in which their mood is quite dysphoric and low. And something like that, where you just educate yourself a bit more, completely shifts your understanding of it, where you don't label moody people as bipolar, and you start getting a better sense of empathy on what it entails. And even with that sentiment of just how I mentioned it now, it was quite intentional to say how we label people as bipolar, which can often, in the way we speak and the terminology we use, can almost categorize someone as being only what their disorder is. And I think we need to also be mindful of that and say this is an individual that experiences bipolar mood disorder or is living with bipolar mood disorder, rather than saying the individual is bipolar. And it's subtle things like that in how we communicate that play a massive role in perpetuating stigma. And I think all of us have a role to play in saying, let's be mindful of how we speak and why we're speaking in those ways, to make sure that we are not perpetuating something that we're always saying, can we try and shift this? Because it's one thing to say we want to see it differently in society. It's another thing to actually follow through with intention and active participation in eradicating that stigma.
Sikanda, we're running out of time. Tell me, what treatment options are available, especially for those who are having suicidal thoughts? What should they do?
Yeah, so I would say it's going to differ from the different levels of society that we find ourselves in. You know, accessibility and availability differs throughout our society because of the inequality that we have in South Africa. But I would say we can start off with our loved ones as support systems, you know, the family, our partners, the community members can be individuals that we turn to. And if they can't assist, they can point us in the right direction of higher structures in which one can present at their nearest clinic clinic or their nearest hospital and start seeking out the assistance from healthcare providers. And I think, you know, the treatment options that are available would be a psychotherapeutic approach or counseling approach. There's medication approaches that are also available. There's a myriad of available treatment modalities. But what's important is to identify what is the most available, accessible, and sustainable option for each individual. And that will obviously require a tailored case-by-case approach. And that's why I said it's best that we start with those closest to us and create that supportive structure, and those individuals can then point us in the right direction of broader structures, even institutions and organizations such as SADC, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group.
Sikanda, I wish we had more time, so much to talk about on this very sensitive but very important topic. Thank you so much for coming through to the show. We appreciate your time. That was Sikanda Kaila, a clinical psychologist. Remember that if you have attempted to commit suicide or have suicidal thoughts, please contact SADC Suicidal Emergency Contact Number on 0800 567 567 or their 24-hour helpline 0800 456 789. After the break, we speak to Sebenzile Msibi, an occupational therapist, about the role of occupational therapy in suicide. Please stay with us. Access to mental health services at primary health care in Gauteng province continues to improve, with the province transforming mental health services and ensuring that quality mental health services are accessible, equitable, and comprehensive, also integrated at all levels of health system in line with the World Health Organization. To talk to us about the role of occupational therapy in suicide, we're joined by Tshwane District Health Services occupational therapist Sebenzile Msibi. Good morning and welcome to Vital Signs.
Thank you so much.
Sebenzile, talk to us about what prompted this integration. I know in the package that we had, the lady I spoke to said they never received therapy and they didn't even know where to go. And you could see that after such a long time, it's still painful to them as a family.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so the Constitution of South Africa, the Mental Health Care Act, those things clearly state that mental health or health care in general should be accessible and equitable everywhere. And that includes communities in the most rural places, it includes semi-rural, it includes the urban places. So also due to that life acidemania, I don't know if you remember that, that also showed the Department of Health that there's a huge gap between the urban and the rural places where there's no equal access to health care. So due to those things, so there was a strategic plan that the government implemented so that we can give health access to the people in the rural areas. So all of the mental, not just mental, but like the whole of MDT, which includes doctors, nurses, occupational therapists, psychologists, everyone that you can find in a hospital is now placed in the clinics.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sebenzile, I know that these services are very expensive and you usually find them in private hospitals. Are these free and how accessible are these? Can someone just walk to a clinic and have access to these services?
Yes. So these services are free for the community in order for us to reach the goal of access. Because everywhere around there's Batupili principles which talk about accessibility. So we want the healthcare to be accessible in all levels. And also it's very easy to treat from primary level rather than taking things up to tertiary level where it's also most expensive. So it's easier to identify and prevent in primary level. And then from there, if it's a very big case or something, then district or tertiary. But yeah, everyone is welcome. It's free of charge, and that's why we're trying to do health awarenesses to make everyone aware, because it's a very new program that nobody was aware of. So everyone must be aware in the communities so that they can come and know that the services are there and available for them anytime they need them.
Especially with what is happening with
Yes,
COVID.
yeah.
Sebenzile, we have Anonymous. Good morning and welcome to Vital Signs. Can we have your comment or question?
Yes, good morning, madam.
Yes, good morning.
Madam, my name is Samuel Chipido,
Yes.
and I see here on TV something. Last week, I sit here alone. I suffer from sugar. I got sugar. My feet is sugar and high blood.
Yes.
And I didn't walk anymore. It's now 5 years. I'm out of work. I'm a pensioner now because of the sick. And I sit here alone in the room. And my ideas rolling in my phenomenon. I owe capital 96,000 rand. And every moment they call me, hey, we want our money. Hey, we want only 5 minutes. Hey, what are you saying? We want our money. And in my head rolling something, I haven't got money. I don't work. Where did I going to get that money? I'm going to make another plan with my life. And something says to me, no, it's the wrong thing. You must find help. I don't say my wife. I don't talk to my wife. It's only me alone in my head. I know, hey, I'm going to take my life because I haven't got that money and I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to go to steal money or rob. What I'm going to do. Can you help me, please?
Anonymous, I feel so sorry about what is happening with you. There is a number on the screen, which is a toll-free number. You can speak to a counselor. It's private and no one will know about this. It's 0800 567.
I know it. I got it. I take that number. Okay,
Yes.
so I must call, give them a call.
Please speak to them because suicide is definitely not the answer, and I hope you really find the help that you deserve.
Okay.
Thank you for the call. Sebenzile, this is one of just many people, especially with COVID. Since the pandemic started, people lost jobs, people are in debt. Are you seeing many people like Anonymous coming through to ask for help?
Yes, it's a very common thing. But we are also trying our best. As I said, it's a new program. We're also going to try and implement projects that can help people who have lost their jobs, try and communicate with people that have skill centers, because that's also my role as an occupational therapist, to deal with the vocational stuff. So that's people dismissed at work, people who don't have jobs, people who are just sitting at home with matric and not knowing what to do. So it's not going to happen now, but it's in the process. We are trying so hard to reach out so that we can get all the help that we can get. And some people can get something, learnerships, or like a simple project like a garden. You can sell the vegetables and stuff, but obviously there must be people that are willing to help us in terms of transferring the skill to the people. So we are dealing with such things and we are trying to implement. Yeah.
Sebenzile, you know, ordinarily it's very difficult when you are in a situation like Anonymous to go and seek help. As people who work in district, among communities, do you work with churches, NGOs, community leaders to try and reach people?
Yes. So we do health awarenesses. We do health talks. We work with the stakeholders. The stakeholders would be like the churches, the schools, community leaders, councillors, mayors, all those people. We do the awareness, we explain our roles so that they can also assist in bringing the people. And we also leave our details so that if someone feels like they don't want to, be out there and explain or be like, okay, I have a problem. We leave our details and like they know which clinics to find us. So through those health talks and explaining our roles as different professions, we are able to reach them, even though they're not going to come out at the same time, but they have the details and they know where to find us. So, yeah.
Talk to us about prevention. Is it part of what you do when you go to communities to talk about how to prevent suicide?
Yeah, sorry. That's actually the main thing in this program is prevention. Because if we prevent, we have less admissions and less complications and all that. So in order for us to prevent, we do health educations, where we will come and educate about a specific condition or teenage pregnancy or childhood trauma, things that people grow up with that are hurting them, but they don't want to come out and talk to people about them. So we do such things, and then awareness campaigns, like just projects and things that make people aware of the services that are available, and also like, let's say suicide, for example, we can like make a show or something in order to make people aware of such things, not necessarily just talking the whole time.
Lastly, talk to us about the importance of support groups within communities when it comes to suicide, which looks like, from what we've heard from the previous interview, that it is slowly becoming a pandemic with numbers of people who are committing suicide.
Yeah. So we do support groups with families and with just patients. And it's very important, let's say for family, if you have an issue maybe with your parent and you don't know how to talk to them about it and you're busy dying inside and you think the only thing to do is just to kill myself. So that's when we come in. We do home visits and we see patients in their houses. We do psychoeducation. If the problem is because of depression, or it's because maybe someone lost their job, or a teenage pregnancy and the mom is busy shouting and not treating the child well. We do psychoeducation so that even the parents can understand. And it's also very important in terms of substance abuse, because the people that are smoking nyaube and all these things, they end up getting substance-induced psychosis, and they tend to become aggressive, they steal things, they do all sorts of things. Now they're mental health patients, but family will not see that because, it's just a drug addict.
Sebenzile, sorry, I wish we had more time. Thank you so much for coming through for this very sensitive topic, but very important. Thank you so much. We wish to see you again in the near future. It's important to note that some people commit suicide without showing any warning signs. If you have attempted to commit suicide or have suicidal thoughts, please contact SADC Suicidal Emergency Contacts on 0800 567 567 or the 24-hour helpline 0800 456 789. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks to our guests for participating. Do not forget, the only way to manage this pandemic, because COVID is still around us, is if we all play safe and protect each other. I'm Zama Butelezi. Do take care.